Hello and welcome to Legislative Report. I'm Steve Mentzer, the state representative for the 97th District in Lancaster County. Pennsylvania has the largest full-time legislature in the nation. Could reducing the size of the 203 members of the House of Representatives bring cost savings without compromising the access of citizens to their elected officials? My guest today believes that that decision should be made by the citizens of Pennsylvania. I'm pleased to welcome Representative Jerry Knowles here today to discuss his bill that aims to reduce the size of the State House. Representative Knowles, welcome to the program.
Well, welcome, Steve. Welcome to you, too. It's great to be here.
And thanks for taking this time with me. You know, I have some occasion to go to Schuylkill County, and I got a couple of friends up there. I'm thinking maybe you know one of them. Do you know Cuppy, the propane distributor up there?
I know the name.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, how about the Williard family? They're long
yes,
time. Okay,
absolutely.
well, there was a Elwood Williard that had a lot of farms up there.
I bet you're familiar with the Yingling family, too.
Oh, well, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, you know what, Jerry? I am fully supportive with your bill that reduces the size of the legislature from 203 to 103 members. I'm a co-sponsor and an enthusiastic co-sponsor. But I thought it might be interesting to our listeners exactly the history of the legislature. In other words, what was the size when it started and how did it all develop?
Listen, before I do that, and I'll be happy to do that, but I want to thank you for your support on this legislation. It's somewhat controversial, which most of the bills that I introduce are for some reason or other, but I believe it's something that's necessary, and I do know that you're a co-sponsor, and I thank you for your co-sponsorship, as well as your support in terms of speaking the bill up, because it's not going to be an easy road to hoe. We've got our work cut out for us, but I think that the major point that you made, Steve, is this decision will be made by the voters of Pennsylvania. It's a change in the Constitution. We can talk a little bit later about exactly what that entails, but it will give the voters of Pennsylvania the opportunity to decide whether or not they want to have 203 members or 151 members. Now, to talk a little bit about the history, and I'm going to use a cheat sheet here because it is quite extensive, but in 1682, there were 42 members of the House. And then in the early 1700s, that dropped to 24. It steadily increased to 76 until 1776. And when creating the Senate in 1790, the Constitution noted that the House could be no smaller than a quarter and no larger than 1/3 the size of the House of 1/3 the size of the Senate, I guess that would, of the House. I'm getting myself a little mixed up. Yeah, that would be that the Constitution said that we can be no smaller than a quarter and no larger than 1/3 in terms of the size of the House. That's where the Senate is at. That's where we go with this ratio, 3 to 1, 4 to 1.
Right.
In 1857, the Constitution was amended to set 100 as the limit. And then in 1873, the Constitution increased the Senate from 33 members to 50 members and set the House at a minimum of 200. It took until around 1885 for the House to reach 100 members, and then the House peaked at 210 members from 1955 through 1963. We had gotten up to 210 members. And then there were many changes that occurred in the 60s and the 70s. There was the Baker versus Carr and other one man, one vote redistricting decisions in the early 1960s, and that sparked the interest in the legislative size. In 1967, the Constitution was amended to set the number of House members to 203, which is what we are at today. But we had a symposium some time ago, and they made mention, someone was actually at the symposium that was a part of this, what had taken place back in the 60s, and they were shooting for the number of 201. But they didn't have computers and they didn't have the iPhones and all this stuff, and they were basically doing this by hand. And with I guess, calculators or whatever they had. But they get into the early morning hours and they counted, and rather than the target of 201, they had 203 members. And they said, we're tired, we're going to bed. And that's really kind of funny, but that's how we got to the 203 members. And that explains a little bit about why people say it's kind of strange, because the bill number originally is 153, and that was the target, to go from 203 to 153. But Chairman Metcalf amended it to correct the mistake that was made back in the 60s.
That's how we got to 151.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's how 153 got to 151.
Yeah. Well, and also in the past, the legislature wasn't always full-time. There were some periods of time when the legislature was part-time. Isn't that correct?
Yes. And and I'm always like you. I'm willing to listen to whatever anybody has to say. But quite frankly, with what we do, if we just came to Harrisburg, so many days a year and just passed legislation, maybe that would be something that could be possible. But we have our district offices, and I'm sure that your district office is like mine, and people have become so dependent on those constituent services. That has become a very important part of this job. I mean, you show me somebody that doesn't take care of constituents back in the district, and some people say, well, you shouldn't be doing that. The state should be doing that. But my answer to that is, you may believe that until you look at the calendar and you realize that your registration for your car expires in 2 days, and then you come into my office and you want me to carry it down and get it back for you.
Or for instance, 30% of my time is spent trying to negotiate DEP, the Department of Environmental Protection, for constituents trying to get something done in my district. So, you'll have no argument for me that, we do have things to do, and they're very important. Mm-hmm. I guess now we represent about 63,000 constituents.
Yeah, we're somewhere in the area of 62,500, 62,500. Now that can vary. It can be a little less. It can be a little more. But currently we're at somewhere around somewhere around 62,500.
All right, and this reduction only takes us up to about 85,000 constituents. And Jerry, I know with technology the way it is as compared to what it was, like you said, in 1967, we can communicate a lot faster, and I know personally I can handle the extra 20 or 23,000 constituents.
Well, I actually, when the last redistricting was done, we had done some research, and I was probably somewhere in the area, I'm going to say around 75,000. And that was because of the growth in the southern part of Schuylkill County and in the northern part of Berks County. So, and I talked to, I've had conversations with, I think it was Ryan McKenzie, Representative McKenzie, and he was telling me that when they did the reapportionment, that he was telling me that he was representing more, in excess of 84,000 is what it would be. Mm-hmm. He was somewhere in the area of 85,000 people. And with the technology that we have today, and he said it was no problem, and he really never. I mean, Steve, we have telephone town hall meetings. We have legislative breakfast. There's all kinds. We have senior expos. There's all kinds of programs that we run to reach out to our constituents and to make ourselves available. So I don't see representing 84,000 as a big deal.
Yeah, I don't either, Jerry. Now, talk a little bit about the procedure here, because it's not just like we decide in the legislature that we're going to pass a bill to reduce the size of the legislature. There's a process here to get it on the ballot for the citizens to decide as to whether they want their legislature reduced. So talk about that system, because...
it's a change in the Constitution of Pennsylvania. So when you're dealing with the change in the Constitution, I say this all the time, Steve, our forefathers, they were geniuses. I mean, people get somewhat frustrated by us because it takes us so long to get something done. It takes us so long to get a bill through and to get it on the governor's desk. And I had an old timer who told me one time, I made the comment to him that we need to run government like a business. And he said, government was never meant to be run like a business. If that were the case, you wouldn't have 3 county commissioners, you wouldn't have a treasurer, you wouldn't have a controller. You know, that's not how business runs.
Exactly.
So these folks back years ago were very, very smart. And they made, when they came up with this Constitution, they believed that they had a good product. And if you're going to change this product, you doggone well better do it right, and we're not going to make it easy for you. So it is indeed, it's a real chore to change the Constitution. And we would be changing the Constitution. And what has been done so far, and this was Speaker Smith's bill 2 terms ago, okay? And I was very happy to take it on. Interestingly enough, Steve, when I first heard about this bill, I was a convert. I wasn't real crazy.
So you weren't for the bill when you first heard about the bill, Jerry?
You know, I had some concerns about the bill.
I'm a little surprised.
Yeah. What about changing my mind, huh? Yeah. But no, you know, when I sat down with Speaker Smith and we talked about the bill, it made perfect sense to me. But getting back to your question, what we have done so far, it has passed the House of Representatives, and that vote was, I believe, 139 to 56. And then after we passed it, it went over to the Senate. And then they took it up over there, and it passed 43 to 6. You know, that's pretty good chunk when you think about 139, 56, 43, 6.
It's a nice chunk.
It's a nice chunk.
But let's go back here, because, you know, I joined the legislature. I'm in my 3rd term, so you know, 2013 I guess would have been my first term. Mm-hmm. And in my first term, we passed a bill that would have reduced the size of the House and the Senate.
Yeah.
Sent it over to the Senate, and it died.
Yeah.
So when we brought it back this session that you brought it back, right, this last session, they split it into 2 bills, correct?
That's correct.
The House and the Senate.
Yeah.
So the one we passed last session was just reducing the House. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And we split them specifically so that it would not die in the Senate,
right?
Correct?
Right.
So,
yeah, we actually passed, I think we passed both. We passed 153 by the margin that I spoke of. And Fred Keller had a bill to reduce the size of the Senate. I think it was from 50 to 33.
Okay.
I think we passed that in the House. Don't quote me on that, but I think we did. But my bill went over, it went over with the vote. It passed in the Senate. And then after that, it was necessary to do, I don't want to call it an advertisement, but a public notice in 2 papers in all 67 counties, indicating what we had done. Okay. So that part, now that has taken place. Okay. So we're at the 50-yard line.
Well, Jerry, if your bill as proposed now is fine, if that bill is altered at all, right, and it goes over to the Senate, that's a problem, isn't it?
It is a problem. This particular piece of legislation is drafted, it's the exact same bill, verbatim, word for word, and that's the way it has to be. It has to pass in the House, it has to go over into the Senate, and then when it passes, then it's a referendum on the ballot, and then the people decide. Okay,
so we're going to take a quick break here, Jerry, but let me understand this again. This bill passed last session by a vote of 136, did you say?
139 to 56.
139 to 56.
And the only reason I know that, Steve, is I have it written down.
and so what we need to do is we need to at least pass that exact same bill and get 103 votes for it this time around.
That's correct.
Okay.
Well, let's talk about that when we take.
Yeah, let's take a quick break. Legislative report will return in just a moment.
Did you know that in the corridors in the first floor of the capital of Pennsylvania, there are nearly 400 individual mosaics? The idea for creating these intricate tiles was first suggested by Henry C. Mercer in 1902. A year later, he received the commission to prove 16,000 square feet of pavement tiles for the Great Rotunda and corridors of the new state capitol building in Harrisburg. Mercer set about designing subjects for approximately 400 mosaics. He chose as his general theme the history of Pennsylvania, and he soon realized that his tiles could tell stories. Although the arrangement seems random, the mosaics are very thoughtfully placed in the floor. The tile sequence is roughly chronological, beginning at one end with the scenes depicting the Native Americans. The mosaics progress into the story of European habitation in the New World and encompass the Commonwealth's triumph through process and intervention. Now you know.
Did you know that Fort Indiantown Gap, located in Lebanon County, is home to Pennsylvania's only Veterans Memorial? C.J. Frederick of Westchester, Bucks County, submitted the winning design that now honors those men and women who have sacrificed their lives in defending this great country. Dedicated to the Commonwealth on October 7, 2001, the Veterans Memorial is surrounded by freestanding walls and houses an amphitheater, which can accommodate large crowds during an event. Strategically placed in the front of the amphitheater is a tomb that reminds visitors of those who gave their lives protecting the freedoms of this nation. The design suggests a war-damaged structure in which Frederick wanted to impress upon those visiting the horrific arena of war. Now you know.
Welcome back to the program. Today I'm discussing a proposal to reduce the size of the legislature with my very good friend Jerry Knowles. Jerry, we were talking about the fact that this proposal has to pass in 2 consecutive sessions,
Right.
and then it goes to the voter, and the voter decides whether they want to reduce the size of the House or not. And to sum it up again, my first term, we voted on a proposal that would have reduced the size of the House and the Senate, and it did not make it through both chambers. So intentionally, we took and we separated the two to give the Senate the opportunity to vote on whether they we wanted to reduce our size, to let them vote on that and also vote on reducing their own size. And that passed with a very, very large margin. And so we have to pass this again in the exact same form as was passed the last session. And I am very, very hopeful with the majority that it passed the last session that will happen. So,
If I can just finish that up, the process passed the House, passed the Senate, advertised in 2 newspapers throughout the Commonwealth. Every county had 2 newspapers. They had to place a public notice in. Exactly as you said, Steve. Now it's got to go through the House,
right,
exactly as it is, go through the Senate, and then another advertisement or another notice in the newspaper, and then we go to the voters.
Right.
And it becomes a referendum on the ballot, and the voters, and that you and I cannot say that enough.
Yes.
It will be the decision of the voters of Pennsylvania, which is the way it should be.
And just to clarify, if this bill is amended in any way, all right, then and passed as amended as a different bill, then the time frame starts all over again, and we got to go through this again.
And the only reason anybody would do that, Steve, is to blow the bill up. And you and I both know what that means.
Exactly.
And you know, Steve, just if I can, this is your show. I don't want to take the show.
No. I want you to talk about this.
But it's kind of interesting because when we look at these numbers, it's pretty. You feel pretty good about it. But the first time around, it's kind of like there's got to be a second half.
Right.
And now people know that this is serious. Now people know that, let's be honest, by reducing the size, it's going to go from 203 to 151. The districts will get larger. There will be fewer representatives. So there's the possibility that some people may be losing their jobs, and that's always a problem.
But Jerry, this is going to be after the new redistricting. I think it's like 2 years after the new redistricting. So through attrition alone, I just don't know that should be a main concern of my colleagues. I know it is, but I just don't think that should be the primary focus. Of course, the primary focus should always be what's in the best interest of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
Exactly. And if we get it on the ballot, if we can get it done in this term and in this session, And if we can get it on the ballot, then it would be part of the reapportionment, the redistricting in the year 2020. That's,
Exactly.
I guess, when they enter into it, and then we would be doing it. We would be doing it with 151. And we talked a little bit, Steve, about the Senate. Okay, and the Senate's at 50. I say all the time, I don't want to become another Senate. I would not go over to the Senate because I think that we are much more engaging. I think that when you look at 50 senators, I don't want to be another Senate. We're going to be 151. We're going to go from a ratio of 4 House seats to 1. We're going to go down to 3 to 1.
Right.
And that's reasonable.
Yeah,
that's
very reasonable. Yeah. Now let's talk a little bit about the cost savings. I sometimes believe that, truly believe that there will be cost savings here. This is more, to me, a standard of setting an example. In other words, if we're going to go out and ask departments to reduce their size, and we're going to try and reduce the cost of government in Pennsylvania, we ought to lead the charge. We ought to lead the charge. And so, what do you think about the?
Well, what I think is and I talked to Sam about this because we talked a bit about the savings. The savings are projected to be $10 to $15 million a year. Now, certain people will tell you that when you're talking about a $31 or a $34 billion budget, that's not a lot of money. It may not be.
Right.
But $15 million is a lot of money where we come from.
Exactly.
And I think that it's always good when you can find ways to cut back because, quite frankly, if you're looking under rocks for nickels, eventually, if you find enough nickels, you're going to find $1, and you're going to have $1. And I think the same thing applies here. I think that controlling our spending is not something. It's something that we've got to look at each and every program. What is that program costing? Is that program successful?
Right.
And can we do the job? Can we represent the people that we're elected to represent? With 151 members, I think that we can. The other thing, in addition, Steve, to the $15 million savings, anybody that's been on the House floor will tell you that it can be rather unruly, and we can all admit to that. I think with a smaller legislature, I believe it would make for better discussion. I think it would make for clear debate. And I think that there would be more of an opportunity for each member to make his or her voice heard. I really believe that. I'm still going to represent 84,000 people, and I believe that I can communicate with them. I need to make I have 2 offices. I have an office in Tamaqua that I share with Senator Dave Argel, and then he has an office in Hamburg that he shares with me. So, our visibility, we make ourselves visible, as you do, throughout the district. And, the job doesn't stop when you walk out of the office. I go into the grocery store, I go in, and people remind me who I work for and what they want done. But, there will be a savings. It'll be a considerable savings. But for the other reasons I spoke, I truly
Exactly.
believe this.
Jerry, and with 151, I can't help but believe that we will be more efficient. We may get more done. We may be more productive with at 151 than we currently are at 203.
The strange thing about it, Steve, is that I've had rural legislators who come to me and they say, the rural legislators are going to take a hosing on this. And then I've had Philadelphia guys come to me, and I'm against it because we're going to have fewer legislators. Well, both proportionately, the rural legislators as well as the urban legislators and the suburban legislators will be affected by this. But it's not going to have an effect on the overall
composition.
Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah, that I'm not sure that, I don't believe that's a good argument. Well, It's very important, that, again, that I believe that as legislators, as elected officials, we have to lead by example. And if we're going to talk constantly about reducing the size of government, then we should try to reduce the size of our own legislature. So,
Steve, let's not forget the fact. My understanding is that we are the second largest legislature, Pennsylvania, in the country, and we are the largest full-time legislature in the United States. I use Ohio is a good. I like to turn to Ohio because they're very close to us.
Exactly.
And their composition, I think they are somewhere around 12 million, a little over 12 million. We, I believe, are a little over 13 million. And this is out of my head. This is memory, and let's see how good my memory is. If memory serves me correctly, they have either 99 or 100 members of their House of Representatives. And then I believe their Senate is 33. So I don't think what we're doing here is unreasonable.
Yeah.
And Steve, again, and people are going to be out there saying, God, they said this 3 times now, and I can't say it enough.
Right.
The voters of Pennsylvania will make the decision. They will decide. It will be on the ballot. They will decide whether they think we should have 151 or 203.
Well,
and I think they deserve that opportunity.
Oh, I absolutely agree. And you'll have a hard time ever convincing me that the other 50 states can function on a smaller legislature, and all of a sudden Pennsylvania for some reason can't. And I think you made that point.
And
very
listen,
well.
I look forward to the debate. I mean, this is going to be a difficult. This is going to be a heavy lift, because there are a certain number of people who are concerned about their job, and there's a certain number of people who are expressing genuine concern. I don't believe that their concerns are I don't think they need to be concerned, but guys that represent large rural areas, they're concerned.
Yeah.
And I commend them. They want to make sure that their people are represented as well as everybody else's. And I cannot thank you, Steve, enough for your support on this, because you've really stepped up to the plate. When you know something's going to happen, it's real easy to jump on board. But you've jumped on board with this issue from the very beginning, and you've made it perfectly clear to me that if there's anything you can do to help you, that you're willing to do so. So I look forward to you getting up on the floor.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it too, because I feel as though I've heard enough from my constituents about the issue, and they want a smaller house.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So what do we got here? That's all we have the time for today. This program is something that I like to do occasionally. I'm Steve Mentzer. I'm the state representative to the 97th District. If you need assistance with any state government matter, feel free to contact me at my local office. The address and number will be shown in a moment. Thanks for watching, and please join me next time for Legislative Report.